Today's program description, Building a Strong Defense Against Rising Customer Returns, is as follows. For many years, retailers have adopted the mindset that merchandise returns are just a cost of doing business. But market demand for free and easy returns is causing retailers significant financial stress from increased operating expense, strain on reverse logistics and DC square footage, and most importantly, decreased EBITDA. While customer returns will never be eliminated, retailers can implement a defensive process that will lower return rates and recoup lost revenue from customer returns. In Newmine's webinar for RVCF, Building a Strong Defense Against Rising Customer Returns, retail operations and technology experts Felton Lewis and Mark Lightbody will educate attendees on how to build a strong defense against rising customer returns with topics such as defensive countermeasures to protect your bottom line, understanding the 4 pillars of returns reduction, retailers have the data, how do you put it to work? Presenting today's program is Felton Lewis and Mark Lightbody. Felton is the Principal of Business Development for Newmine. Felton established a 12-year technology footprint with Yantra, a tech startup that launched distributed order management, as well as AT&T, IBM, eBay Enterprise. He led the early adoption of DOM deployments in the retail space with Walmart, Circuit City, Academy Sports, WMS deployments with Eaton, Motorola, Honeywell, and in the 3PL space with Excel, Logistics, APL, and FedEx. Mark Lightbody is an accomplished software executive with over 35 years of hands-on experience in retail and direct channels. Much of his career was spent with Commercialware and Micros, now Oracle. He brings a deep understanding of the opportunities and complexities related to the design, implementation, and adoption of enterprise software and technologies. Mark's hands-on experience supporting a wide range of leading retail brands in critical supply and value chain initiatives gives him a unique understanding of the business processes and metrics required to successfully manage and grow a business. So without further ado, I am pleased to turn the program over to Felton and Mark.
Thank you, Kate, Susan, and Kim, and the entire team at RVCF who helped us launch this first education series. Good afternoon. My name is Felton Lewis, and I will do my absolute best to moderate today's call. Welcome, full-throated, to all the RVCF members on the call. Welcome to any non-RVCF retailers who may be joining us for the first time. And welcome to our industry colleagues and practitioners who are all moving forward on this returns reduction movement. I'm pleased to have Mark Lightbody with me, a partner at Newmine, a lifelong consultant in retail. Mark will be revealing key findings from the RVCF return survey that was conducted this quarter and will share insights with you that you can take back to your own organization. Things that Mark will cover off will include building the business case inside your organization to launch a returns reduction program in 2019, the essential business processes your organization has to define upfront and get right and solidify before you can even launch a return reduction program or implement a software package. 3, the 4 pillars of a returns reduction solution and key design considerations for those of you who may be evaluating whether you should buy or build, and the value of looking back and analyzing the data that you already have in your core business systems. I would define core business systems as your order management, your CRM, your call center, review data, point of sale, as well as sourcing. Also, I encourage all of you to share this presentation with other functional business units that may not be on the call today and forward it along to folks in finance, supply chain, merchandising, buyers, and e-commerce who all have a definite mission, if you will, to reduce returns. The returns reduction movement definitely was started by RVCF. I think I met Kim first back in 2004. And the one thing that Kim impressed upon me is RVCF is not a trade show. He said we focus on solving real world supply chain issues. And at the time, Kim, I believe chargebacks was a $40 billion problem in retail. Kim always encourages new members to come out to the fall conference and get a chance to meet with other RVCF members. And I've been a fan of RVCF ever since. Back in December, I had a quick conversation with Kim regarding his fall conference, and I was asking what was top of mind amongst you, the RVCF members. And Kim mentioned he had heard enough from all of you on the call that returns was getting out of hand. So we commissioned a return survey that was conducted by Newmine just to begin to understand the challenges you as members were facing with returns. Your input as an RVCF member is critical to the design of future conferences, future education series, and future design thinking group sessions like the one we're going to have in May. Largest 2019 growth opportunities in retail for all the RVCF members and retailers are on the line. Your e-commerce websites are significant forms of growth. Online marketplaces are significant opportunities in retail for growth. And I think one thing that's interesting as a data point, e-com is contributing between 12 to 21% of the retailer's total revenue. And you have new digital native brands who are coming online targeting millennials. Digital native just means they started as an online retailer. They don't have any stores. Companies like Farfetch offer free global returns, free returns collection, free pickup service. So with all this free, my question I often have is how can you make a profit when you have to give everything away for free? We offer free returns. We offer free shipping. We offer free collection of returns. We offer appeasements if the item does not fit. If they call the call center, post a negative review, we give back some type of offset. So my question again is when we start looking at managing and reducing costs, recognizing that online retail is driving some changes in distribution. Our conclusion is that apparel returns are not sustainable. And I'm going to try to back that up with a few data points. Returns place enormous stress on an organization's distribution network. Most return distribution networks were never set up for this many channels that we're supporting today. So the call out on the right that reverse logistics is time consuming and expensive. We're entertaining returns from e-commerce, from the store, from the marketplace, from suppliers who drop ship on our behalf, and now even returns from airports. If you see a kiosk at an airport. I'm going to tee this next conversation up for my colleague, Mark, who will be joining us. This current state of customer returns are data points that we had pulled together at Newmine, but the one that really caught my attention was on average, every return is handled by more than 7 people. So there's a lot of resources that are attached to the return process. And one data point I'd like you to walk away with as a bottom line, it's estimated that returns either sold at a discount or discarded cost retailers 4.4% of the total revenue each year. So that decreased EBITDA is something, if we do nothing, it will still cost us 4.4% of total revenue on average. But if we try to do something to minimize returns, as Mark will share with us. So Mark, if you're on the call, I'd like to turn it over to you to introduce our guests to Newmine and share a little bit of your experience working in retail.
It's great. Thanks, Felton. Thank you, Kate. And most of all, thank you to all the participants for taking time today. A little bit about Newmine and sort of how we got into returns reduction. We are a consulting company. We're based just outside of Boston. We're 9 years old. Our team are all veterans, so they've been in the trenches like you have. They've had P&L responsibility across really the entire value chain, including technology and M&A activities and so forth. So as a company, we focus on bottom line initiatives. I mean, that is our mission, is to help our clients build a better bottom line through effective use of technology, leveraging assets, minimizing risks, dealing with change management. I mean, all the crucial elements that must be dealt with if you're going to be successful with, executing a sound omni-channel strategy. And on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about some of our experiences here. So again, we focus really in on the bread and butter of your business. So from operations optimization through technology and M&A, you'll get some examples here, and you'll see the clients we work with, they range. They're typically omni-channel retailers that are interested in doing a better job of executing omni-channel or are interested in implementing omni-channel. So how do they do it? That's exactly where we come in. And you'll notice in the upper box, returns reduction. that actually started for us in 2004. Seems to be a magical year. Two members of our team were part of a brand called Orchard Brands up here in Boston. And the classic case, returns had spiked there. They're an apparel and accessory and footwear retailer, and returns had spiked 30%. So the CEO got the financial statements at the end of the quarter, and after he picked up himself from the floor, he did what any good CEO would do. They called in the next in line and said, "What is the problem? Please fix it." And so that person happened to be the vice president of operations. And he in turn created an internal cross-functional team to try to tackle the problem. And it's pretty daunting because in 2004, I mean, it pretty much had to be done by what I call brute force. So the team assembled the reports that they had and developed a regular cadence of activities and meetings to get together to agree upon, number one, which problems should be tackled. Are they category-based? Are they supplier-based? Are they style-based? Are they color-based? I mean, this is a lot like eating an elephant one bite at a time here. So as a team, they basically started the process, what was a consistent collaborative process. And over the course of the next year, by implementing that methodology and that process, they were able to successfully knock the returns rate back down by 5 points. Company that size, that is a lot of money to the bottom line. So it showed us that returns reduction could work and would work, even if it's done in a labor-intensive fashion. Now, I'd like to say there was a happy ending to this, but when the distribution center was moved and the team left the company, the process disappeared. It was not sustainable. And when the process disappeared, the returns rate went back up. So the lessons learned for us in 2004, 2005 were that, number one, returns reduction is possible. And number two, it has to be developed in such a way that it is sustainable and can be implemented into a company's DNA, even when the key people leave. So those were the two key takeaways that kind of started this whole process off. And that kind of leads us to where we are today.
Thank you, Mark. One of our objectives in our first education series is to share with the audience how they can begin to formulate and build a business case with the financial things that our CFOs need to sign off on projects. Could you walk us through the key benefits of building out this business case for a returns reduction program?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that we looked at very, very closely, as we started to develop this concept and business value around returns reduction. And I would say first and foremost, it is a financial justification. We looked at all of the key components, and the next slide will basically outline how we build it from the bottom up. But from the top-down view, looking at margin, operating costs, shipping costs, markdown strategy, the key drivers behind this, we have developed a fairly simple evaluation that says for every $1 million you can reduce in returns, you will send $500,000 to the bottom line, which is huge. Now, we have a calculator on the Newmine website. We invite you to securely, confidentially go out and plug in your own numbers, and you can see what your results might look like. We have an example here coming up in just a minute. But first and foremost, this is a financial justification. And again, we're going to take a look at the components of that. So as you look at this slide, there's a lot of data here, but the column on the right-hand side, think of this in terms of an enterprise impact and an enterprise win. You have the key components, obtaining repeat business. the happier customers are, and part of that component is not having to return product, the more they're going to buy. Pretty logical. So the overall increase in sales volume, we focus on net. I think it will have an impact on a better top line number, but it will most certainly have a positive impact on the bottom line number. So, if you're a $100 million retailer with a 30% returns rate, you're really a $70 million retailer. We want to change that. And that's what returns reduction is all about. So as you look at this, you look at all of the key components with the merchandising, the markdown strategy, fewer markdowns results in a higher price. So if you're measured based on your margin, this is going to help that. Reducing your purchasing requirements, your recycling, right on down the line, there are huge drivers, some bigger than others. Some are less material and more sort of environmental. The less you throw away, the less you're clogging up landfills, et cetera. So there are some corporate ownership types of benefits here. But primarily, we focused in on the financial benefits. Again, margin, operating costs, shipping costs, and inventory. Those are the big drivers. And again, they're going to vary by each type of retailer or each segment out there in terms of their point of emphasis. But the economic value added, or EVA, really helps to define sort of the DNA behind how you arrive at the business justification for your individual company. So in terms of kind of a recap here, every $1 million in returns reduction sends $500,000 to the bottom line. That's a typical specialty or luxury retailer. And Felton and I would like to thank all of the RVCF members who took the time to share their voice on returns. And I would like to now share some insights, that we gleaned from this. It was very interesting because it confirmed in our minds a lot of the data that we have been receiving from our clients as we speak to them about returns. The first key point, the respondents indicated there's no single executive owner of returns. I mentioned the example of Orchard Brands. The designated return czar to deal with that crisis happened to be the VP of operations. And similarly, when we look at the responses, while there wasn't a single owner per se, the ownership tended to fall within the supply chain business area. And that's logical. It's inventory. You're dealing with merchandise. So it was very interesting. There's no such thing today in the executive suite as a chief returns officer. So consequently, somebody needs to own it. So again, the ownership that we have seen through the responses tends to be within the supply chain today. The second point, and this is tough, and I think it relates to the third point, is that the extent of collaboration. There was a lot of collaboration post-season when you did, we call that sometimes a post-mortem, but when you look back at how the season went and you're trying to get a handle on what's coming up, they get together and they review suppliers and categories and styles and what worked, what didn't work, etc. The challenge there is that without a regular cadence in season, it's awfully hard to impact returns reduction. So the collaboration was really emphasized as a challenge. And I think all of that relates to the third point. We asked respondents, what are your biggest obstacles to achieving returns reduction in 2019? And the top two answers were a lack of resources and access to data. Again, no surprise. Very few companies have dedicated returns teams that typically falls under, the auspices of individual departments to the degree that you can devote whatever time you have to returns and looking at these things. Resources are tough. And the other thing is access to data. As we get into really the structure of how you should be looking at this, there is a lot of data. The thing to keep in mind is that when it comes to returns, trying to get to the root cause of why products are coming back requires data from multiple sources. Our view is that there is not a single source of truth that gives you the entire picture. It's rather more like a puzzle where you need to put pieces together from different areas to come up with an intelligent, determination of why products are coming back. So resources and data, and that's going to be a theme that we're going to continue on here in terms of our discussion today.
Thank you, Mark. I think we checked the box called helping the audience build the business case. I think next up was, can you share the essential business process elements an organization may need to solidify even before going down the path of picking a technology?
Absolutely. And again, this is a process that was put in place by our team in 2004. But I used the term brute force, and I really meant it. And there are 6 steps that have to be followed here. One is the review of the data. Now, in 2004, it was everybody had their Excel, and they had some reports that came off of the OMS and the customer service system and the PO. The data was all over the place, but everybody had their own data. And in some cases, it was always a challenge because returns on one report would show at 100 million and returns on another report would show at 103 million. So, trying to get everybody lined up. But the point is you have to monitor the data, and it comes from multiple places like the PIM, PLM, merchandise systems, OMS, etc. Number 2 is identifying the problem. So what did the team do at Orchard Brands? They sat down, and as a group, they came up with a list of potentials. And through their investigative work and analysis, step 3, they were able to come up and agree as a group on those targets that seemed to make the most sense to move the needle for returns reduction. So monitoring the data, identifying the problem and analyzing it, and then taking action. So if we come up with a particular style that's got a high returns rate because of size and fit, what do? Probably the first thing is to pull the product and double check it for size specs. And that information exists, but it's probably months old, when you look at the initial product specs, lab tests, etc. So being able to look at all of that, do the physical measurements, evaluate and determine as best as possible what the customer is telling you. Is it too large, too small, too tight, too narrow, etc. But based on that evaluation, you need to take an action. And it may be more than one action. If it's that bad, maybe we take it off sale because I've got 80% of them bouncing right back at me. That's an extreme. But I think that, in terms of coming up with the best set of effective actions to take to try to correct the problem is crucial. Number 5, teaming up. Basically, this is a collaborative process. Without a process, a regular cadence in place, things get lost. Individual departments chase the crisis du jour. And that's just the reality. It's just how things seem to work today. So in terms of getting everybody on the same page, that team up is crucial, the collaboration piece. And then finally, you need to measure. So did what I do make a difference? Now, sometimes that data is available within a week or 2. Sometimes it's not available until the end of the quarter or the end of the season for that particular promotion. But no matter how you slice it, measuring the results of our actions are critical to know if the returns reduction strategy is performing as expected, and also to learn so that when the problem comes up again, we know better what to do next time. So whether you do these manually, semi-manually, or in an automated fashion, there are 6 steps to get this done.
Thank you, Mark. I think as we transition into maybe those in the audience are looking at, should I build an application like this? Should I buy an application like this? Hopefully, Mark, you can take us through the core 4 pillars of what a returns reduction platform will look like, and also things the audience should consider when making those evaluations themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it all starts with the data. You know, we have a point here, and that, you know, every retailer out there has data. You know, the question is, where's it coming from, and is it in a usable, actionable format? And that's typically the challenge. We saw that in the RVCF questionnaire. I have a resource issue, so who's going to go get all this stuff? And I have a data issue. There's too much of it, and it's not humanly possible to look at it all. So let's look at, if you look at this funnel, you know, product sourcing and QA data is data that impacts returns potentially. It generally happens months ahead of when the product goes on sale, and it tends to be filed away in some system where it's not going to be looked at again unless somebody goes and gets it. That is a source of valuable returns-related data. The next bucket is absolutely essential, and that is your sales and your returns reasons. That typically comes from an OMS-type transaction system, where you gather orders, your demand, shipments, which is your sales, returns, and returns reasons. That is sort of the lifeblood of any kind of analysis, because you need to know what your overall return rates are by unit, by dollar value, and then you need to be able to drill down based on your merchandise hierarchy right down to the SKU level to understand what is coming back. Is there a variance by color? Is there a variance by size? Is it indicative of a category like swimwear, for example? So that is the core data that's essential to any kind of an analysis. The next piece that we find is critical are your product reviews. Because with sales data coming back in, if a customer sends you a return, you may have them check a box in terms of why they're sending it back. 2 things there, that's imperfect data. One, because you may not give them a granular enough reason to make it useful for you. And number 2, typically the customer doesn't really care that much because they want their money back. But they'll tell you something. It kind of comes back to the loyalty of the customer. Well, what customers are on product reviews is very honest. If you have the time and resources and ability to read through three-star or less reviews and look at what they're telling you, there is gold in there, because that's where they're being very specific and telling you about the product. I had a fit problem. I had a shipping problem. I had a service-related problem. I mean, they will tell their neighbors everything. So that particular source of data is huge. So we typically start by looking at the sales and order transaction history and the product review history. We then add in CRM. Customers call. They call the call centers, and they will spend time chatting with you about what they like and what they don't like. It's like a product review, except it's human to human. But that same kind of information is invaluable. And then finally, in being able to incorporate both e-com transactions, which, face it, drive most of the returns, but also store transactions. Those are valid sources of data. So even though the returns rates may not be as high, and typically aren't in brick and mortar, the data is essentially the same and should be incorporated. So when you look at the data, it's coming from multiple sources. So you need to collect it, analyze it, detect what we call anomalies. What's it telling us? What is worthy of our attention to track down and try to fix? Then taking an action against that. And nowadays, you know, I mean, technology, you hear a lot of buzz around artificial intelligence and machine learning, and isn't that wonderful? And IBM has Watson advertisements and so forth. The question always is, how do you put it to a practical business use? And we submit that AI and machine learning have a huge place in a returns reduction type of strategy and platform. So this is the data elements. And again, there are cores like transactions and product review, and then supplementing it with many other sources. The more we know, the better job we're going to do in addressing the 4 pillars of returns reduction. Okay, so if you were going to build a platform, what would it look like? It would look something like this, hopefully a lot like this, whereby the data on the left-hand side is what we just described, running it through the proper analysis to organize it so that I can analyze it, I can drill down on it, but I also want to detect anomalies. What's an anomaly? Anomaly is something that is outside the norm. So if you start your season and I'm saying historically my swimwear category for returns has been at 26%, I would like to target a 24% returns rate or a 25% returns rate. That becomes a benchmark. That's a threshold. Anything above that is determined to be an anomaly. Now, there are other ways to do it, but I'm giving you a very simple example. So that as we ingest all the data and perform the analysis, the system should be looking for anomalies. And when it finds something, it should keep an eye on it automatically in the background. I don't want people chasing this down. I want technology doing it in support of the people that will ultimately take the actions. So placing it on a watch list, and then when it rises to the appropriate level, generate a workflow ticket, an action item submitted to the person that has responsibility for sourcing, if it's a quality issue, operations, if it's a shipping issue, web content, if it's a sizing issue, etc. So leveraging business users to take action on meaningful opportunities here. So, and then once I take an action to measure the success. So the technology should flow in accordance with the 6 steps that we talked about before. And all of that is in support of what we consider to be the 4 prime pillars. Identify the root cause. If I don't know that, I don't have much of a chance to fix the problem. Give it to me on a timely basis. If I know about it too late, it's too late. I need to know in season so that I can take corrective action and prevent returns from coming in. Not eliminate, but prevent or reduce returns. It's got to be actionable. In this kind of an environment, there's a lot of noise. Do I really want to turn you loose to track down a $2 pair of socks that has a high return rate? Probably not. But I definitely want you tracking down a $200 jacket or an $800 pair of shoes. It's all about priorities, using resources wisely. Let the technology do the heavy lifting and tell us what is meaningful for returns reduction. And then finally, collaborative. So these 4 pillars these are the objectives. So everything around return reduction, if it doesn't address one of these or all of these 4 pillars, in our way of thinking, it's noise, okay? Now, up above, you will see the words artificial and machine learning. Just like any piece of technology, the beauty is if you can apply these technologies that exist today in a practical manner. So when I take an action, I might have 6 possible things I can do. Pull the stock, check the specs, look at the lab tests. I mean, there may be a whole hit list of things. But ultimately, I want the system to be able to learn based on what is most effective. I don't want you doing 6 things when 2 things are more than likely going to get me the results I want. So AI and machine learning in technology is available, and here's a wonderful way to apply it. Similarly, with product reviews, you might get a report in every week and somebody paws through it, but who has the time for that? There are programs, again, technology called natural language processing that are able to read through all those product reviews, look for keywords, and then relate those keywords back to reasons. So what is the customer telling me? Are they telling me they have a fit problem? Okay, great. So now I can start to get more granular and closer to the holy grail of root cause. The more I have, the better I can do. But to be able to perform all of these tasks it's not possible humanly. So we need technology to do it. So this is a vision of how the platform can, and in our estimation, should be created to help you achieve returns reduction.
Thank you, Mark. A lot of insights on just the core capabilities that are needed. One thing I've observed about RVCF and a lot of the conferences I've attended in the past is there's a huge contingent of folks who could benefit from vendor insights, and they may own the relationship with the supplier and the manufacturer. So I was hoping now, Mark, that you could maybe drop this in a larger context of how that capability fits inside the larger value chain.
Yeah, absolutely. And the returns reduction platform, as I've just talked about it, it's merchandising based. It's looking at product and history around the product. But it's not a stretch if I include vendor information or supplier information on the left-hand side. What do I have? I have all the fundamentals that I need for vendor compliance, whether it's quality. I know all the return information. If you are positioning or if you're positioning yourself for or using an RFID technology, that type of transaction can follow through or should be able to follow through, so that if I have multiple plants making the same style, which plant is doing a good job and which plant is not. RFID and related technologies make that kind of determination possible, because that information is tracked all the way through to the customer sale and all the way back when the garment comes back in. So when you look at the supplier side of things, whether it's a deal you negotiated based on return rate and you're going to charge back or get a credit of some type, it should be able to give you the justification you need for any kind of negotiation or enforcement of a policy. It's also great information for the supplier. If it was me, I'd want to know how my products are performing. And if I have issues anywhere in the supply chain, I want to know. So the supplier links are a natural byproduct of any kind of returns reduction platform. Now, over on the right side, you have the end of the value chain, which is most importantly the customer. If you import a customer ID with those detailed transactions, what do you have? I know exactly what you bought, what you kept, what you returned, when all of this happened. So in terms of being able to structure crucial data that could potentially feed a selling process to provide better advice, not on crowdsourcing, but on Mark Lightbody history, to be able to recommend. You are in Polo Ralph Lauren jeans. You know what? You don't take a 36-inch waist, you take a 34-inch waist. Why make them guess? So this information is all relevant. So a merchandising-based returns reduction system has the ability, or should have the ability, to reach out and positively impact other business areas and most importantly, your customer. So this is the vision around the platform like this. And so if you're looking to build it, here's your blueprint. You know, that's really the key.
Thank you, Mark. We're probably about 4 to 5 minutes away from the Q&A, tracking perfect on time. And I just wanted to walk through the 4 pillars in action and share that with our audience again, because there's actually core UIs and core screens that back up the capability.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, when you look at a product like, you know, like a returns reduction platform, you know, the vision on this is, you know, there's a component that you see, and that is the analytics in support of the 4 pillars. It should be real time. It should be drill down, drill across, get to the most granular level you've got, or view it at the department, class, category, style, fulfillment location, whatever's meaningful. That needs to be part of the component. So for the geeks and all of us that love to play with numbers, that capability needs to be there for ad hoc types of analysis and decision making. In addition, the root cause information, you know, whether it's product reviews, return reasons, sourcing data, this again in support of the root cause identification. So real-time analytics speaks to timeliness. Root cause speaks to just that. The more we know, the better job we'll have, or the better opportunity we'll have to fix the problem. The collaboration, you know, a lot of people are familiar with workflow capabilities out there. There's not a lot of magic to it. What it does is it helps you to keep from dropping the ball. And so in terms of being able to measure and monitor the feed, distribute the feed, and track it to its ultimate completion, that is the goal for collaboration. Everybody on the same page with the same information. And then actionable, being able to sort through the noise to come up with meaningful actions that you can take. Typically, they're style-based, but they might be, for example, we had one client that had a challenge with a particular designer. It was a very high-end shoe designer. And the challenge that they discovered through looking at the data was the fact that the sizing was inconsistent across styles. So a size 6 in one style was a 6, but in another style, a 6 is really a 6.5. And in yet another style, a 6 was a 5.5. So if you're telling your customers that everything's a 6 is really a 6, and all of a sudden you've got these variances, guess what? You've got a lot of returns coming back, a really high ticket merchandise. That was discovered through a look back analysis, and we're going to talk about that in a bit. And the fix was pretty simple. They had the designer come in to do training, and number 2, they adjusted the sizing recommendations for each style so that they were accurate. Result, they knocked the returns rate down by 30 to 40% in almost no time. So this is not all rocket science. A lot of this is just knowing what's going on, identifying a problem quickly, and then taking concrete actions that are effective in measuring success. So any kind of analysis that or user interface that would sit on top of an application needs to address one or more of the 4 pillars, and it needs to be easy to adopt and replicate from generation to generation to generation within the business.
Thank you, Mark. I think we're tracking excellent. We covered off the business case, making sure it's a financial driven business case, recognizing that $1 million in reduced returns can actually drive a $500,000 contribution to the bottom line. You walked us through the 6 steps that organizations need to do to even get ready for a returns reduction program, and gave us some good insights if you were looking at buy or build. The last thing on our agenda was to talk about a look back analysis. You mentioned that a couple times in your remarks. Maybe share an example, and then we're going to announce the winner of the look back analysis and turn it over to Q&A and back to Kate.
Yeah, absolutely. A look back, it's an historical perspective. So what do? You know, we utilize the data that you already have as a retailer, but we organize it in such a way that we can make a lot of sense out of it. And, you know, so you're looking back at trends, you're looking at performance according to your merchandise hierarchy. We're looking for historical returns rates, spikes, seasonal factors, everything to do from a merchandising perspective that will give us the history that we need to effectively move forward. So, you know, they say those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and that is absolutely true. You know, we want to incorporate the historical look back to set benchmarks moving forward. You know, what can you fix? Where are the low-hanging fruit that we can address, the quick wins? And then moving ahead in a returns reduction platform or strategy, what's realistic? What should we set for targets? We tend to go pretty conservative. That's our nature. So if we choose a 1 or a 2% reduction on a particular category, let's shoot for that. We may get 3 or 4 or 5%, but let's only plan for 1 or 2. And that's, you know, under promise and over deliver is the watchword. So essentially the look back gives us the basis for moving forward in a much smarter fashion. And we do that collaboratively with the client. So we may be locked up doing our initial analysis on all of this, but we come back and we present it to the retailer so that we can discuss it, agree upon it, and then help the retailer to set some reasonable targets moving forward. So that's why we do it. I mentioned the example of the, you know, if the shoe doesn't fit, fix it. That's the example I just gave you. We had another one where we found a particular set of shorts, 2 consecutive fall seasons in a row had the same issue. It was running too small. Yet on the website, it said it's normal sizing. So that's 2 seasons in a row where the returns rate spiked because the web content wasn't updated to accurately reflect that, you know, you really need to size up on this. If that had been caught when it first happened, there's a lot of money that would have still been on the table. So, you know, there are a lot of anecdotal examples that are easy. That came right out of the look back. And, you know, there are many more that continue to evolve every day that retailers execute on a returns reduction strategy. So that's what a look back analysis is.
Thank you, Mark. And we're at an inflection point where we get to look back and actually award a look back analysis to one of the RVCF retail members. So this company was founded back in 1670, 349 years ago, and it's HBC. They are the winner of the look back analysis. So we'll follow up through RVCF and reach out to the HBC team. And Mark, if you could, before we turn it back to Kate, maybe just walk through the benefits of a look back analysis, and then we'll turn it back over to our host for Q&A.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, if you look at the list here, you know, that we have a checklist of value that we look to deliver. It starts with your data. We do our own analysis on it. And then, you know, we look at things like seasonal return patterns and return targets, and, you know, how we could potentially create workflows to your advantage. Potential prescriptive actions, you know, because not every return reason is going to have the same kind of actions to be taken. There will be some in common, but they are not identical. So how do these vary based off of your particular environment? And it might be as basic as, do you accept returns in stores? That's going to impact the workflow and the data flow. So there are a lot of these kinds of things. The returns anomalies, I mentioned the 2 examples about the shoes and the shorts that ran small. We look for these kinds of things. Low-hanging fruit, quick wins. It's the name of the game. Blind spots. things that, they're not obvious until you get in and start looking at the data in a particular way. And then the final thing is we provide a month's worth of free access to the Chief Returns Officer. So, we've given you the blueprint. So if you like to build software, you know how to build it. If you don't like to build software, we've also told you where you can find it. And it is called Chief Returns Officer. So you will have access to that as well. This is we've not tried to make this into an infomercial. We've tried to make it educational. But the fact is, we know returns reduction works, and that is the good news.
Thank you, Mark. I definitely appreciate you joining me on this call. Kate, back to you to open up the Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Felton and Mark, for all of your insights and techniques. So now I'd like for us to address some of the questions we have here. One question we got here, do you see prevention of returns as starting prior to the sale? For instance, using consumer inputs to establish a better fit?
Yes, I think that there are, there's a couple of components to this when you look at the timing. One is in season. I mean, we're trying to catch returns before they happen. So having access to the near real-time capabilities, taking action right away, that's part of it. But this data also should and would support a post-season effort. So getting together, looking and planning for the next season. So as we look at things like return rates, and it could be a financial plan. What is, every financial plan and merchandise plan has returns factored into it. So if we can lower them, I mean, everybody's plan is going to look that much better. But definitely you want to incorporate the intelligence that you gather in terms of how I should present it. Should I carry this color again? What should I do on the sizing? It may alert you to a number of things. It may cause you to change your QA process for specific suppliers for just that reason. So I think the organizational impact and benefits from a post-season analysis, meaning pre-sale of the next season, is extremely beneficial.
Yeah, 30 seconds just as an extension of Mark's comment, as it relates to customer inputs that they could provide a retailer. I'm starting to see a lot more trends toward 3D. So capturing a picture ahead of the sale, sharing that picture with the retailer including that in their profile that they build out, so we get a little bit closer on the fit side.
Okay. Can you share a few examples of what data the retailer has to provide Newmine in order to conduct the look-back analysis, and how long does it take for Newmine to analyze the historical data?
Did you take that, Mark?
Great question. We try to keep it simple and IT light. The two components that we need ideally are the transactional data. Pardon me. That means orders, sales, returns, units, dollars, return reasons. Typically comes from the OMS system, okay, typically. And if we have 2 years, then that is ideal. Does it have to be 2 years? No, it could be a year. But, if you have 2 years, it allows us to identify things that happen over multiple seasons. So particularly if you have evergreen product that is carried throughout each season and over multiple years, boy, it would be great to have that information. So that is the one thing that we would ask of anybody doing a look back analysis is let's get our hands on that data. Now, ideally, and most retailers and direct marketers, e-com companies, they're already spinning that transaction data off to a data warehouse, an external vendor like Experian, for example, that's doing, list and customer evaluation. So if we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we don't want to. If you're a multiple brand company, let's pick one brand that has, the highest returns issues and focus there. So, we're not trying to boil the ocean here. We're trying to address a particular situation in a reasonable amount of time with a reasonable amount of effort. The second file, so file 1 is just the transaction file, the order transaction file. File number 2 are product reviews. And we actually, with the retailer's permission, can go directly to Bazaar Voice, Power Reviews, Turn to any of the leading providers and extract that directly. So, product reviews, transaction data, typically, it is very IT light from a resource perspective. That is, that's the design. And as far as the second part of that question, once we have the data, we typically have the look back completed within a couple of weeks. So it's a pretty quick turn.
Thank you. What, if any, benefits do you see from a so-called fit tool at the point of sale?
Well, I think, there's a lot of, we're kind of two sides of the same coin, They're addressing it at the point of sale, or at the point of purchase. And, fit tools, they have a place. Now, I can't speak to the effectiveness, how well it works, but I agree with the objective. We're trying to give the customer the best recommendation so that they don't feel like they have to order multiple sizes. That is complementary to returns reduction. It's all about getting it right the first time. We are all about returns reduction. Now, we're going to approach it from a slightly different angle in that, as I described in terms of the technology, very customer specific purchasing and return history that could potentially be integrated into a personal selling situation. So, a true fit, somebody like that, they use crowdsourcing or crowd-based data accumulation. So, how does this fit across the universe? Whereas we're coming at it from how does this fit on Mark Lightbody? Same, but the objectives are exactly the same. We want to reduce returns. We must reduce returns. So very complementary in my view.
Great. So it looks like we have time for about one more question here. How would you recommend a retailer get started internally on building support for a return reduction program?
Start with the business case. And I think, you're seeing so much in the press. I mean, I can't tell you how many articles I have archived talking about returns rate. I mean, it's one of the few transactions that retailers do that has its own holiday. Other than Black Friday and Cyber Monday, there's National Returns Day. I think this year it was January 3rd. So that should tell you something right there. So you build a financial justification, because it's got to get in line with all the other projects. I need a new OMS and a WMS, and I need to replatform my e-commerce and so forth. The good news is that all those applications are multi-million dollars and take 12 to 18 months and have a long ROI. Returns reduction is a quick implementation, execution, and a quick ROI, but it still has to justify itself. So start with the business case. You look at the key components, starting with, if my returns rate is 20% overall and I've got certain categories spiking to 30, what would that mean if I could reduce it by 1%? We always believe in reasonable numbers because that's just how we are. But I think you'll never go wrong. If I knock it down by 1%, what does that mean in terms of recovered margin, reduced operating costs, reduced shipping costs, particularly if you're offering free shipping back, space, markdown strategy, take it from the ground and build it up to build the financial case. That's your starting point. The next point is to look and say, okay, who might be my return czar, if you will, internally? Who would own the initiative? We talked about supply chain as being the primary source so far, but it's not the only source. So, you know, it's a healthy discussion. I know that RVCF would welcome the opportunity to discuss it. We at Newmine welcome the opportunity to discuss it. Ask the hard questions and talk about your particular situation to come up with the best plan. But man, it starts with the numbers, because that's what will get everybody's attention.
Thank you, Mark, and congratulations to Hudson Bay. Again, the winner of the look back analysis, and back to you, Kate, to finish up.
Great. Thank you for your questions and for attending today's seminar. Felton will be presenting at the RVCF Spring Conference, so be sure to attend his presentation and introduce yourself. A link to the on-demand version of this webinar will be sent to you following our program. For those of you who have further questions about the material covered in today's presentation, or whose questions were not addressed in the Q&A portion, please feel free to contact Felton Lewis or Mark Lightbody directly. Thank you and have a great day.